Okay, welcome everyone to Canyon City Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting, Wednesday, February 28th, 2018. Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Mulready, will you call roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Maloney.
Yes. Oh, here. Here.
Commissioner Sherrod.
Here.
Commissioner Dorito.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Harmon.
Here.
Commissioner Ledoux.
Here.
Commissioner Gill. I'm sorry, Councilmember Gill. And he is obviously absent, but the good news is that we do in fact have a quorum, sir.
All right, thank you. Before we get started, we have a special guest tonight. We have Mayor Preston Troutman, who has a presentation.
Thank you. Great. I wanted to thank you for the time that you spent for the City of Canyon City and our council. We appreciate what you do. I know I was on the Planning Commission for 6 years, and I know there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of thought to it, and I appreciate it because I was in your seat for quite a long time. But the council appreciates it as well. And I just want to take a few minutes of your time. We redesigned the pin for Canyon City, put some color into it and the bridge on it. I'd like to present each one of you with one of these. I have one on my lapel, and I, of course, wear it proudly. And I'd like you to have this and to wear it and to take it with you in the public. We redesigned it about a year ago. So I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just come up there and hand it to you, and I guess we'll get them out. I'm not going to pin you, I don't know.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just missing one.
But again, thank you. We really do appreciate what you do for us in the city and also for the council. And we hope that you continue with that in the future. I know you will. The other thing I wanted to ask you is we would like to meet with the Planning Commission and the council. And I think, Dina, could we set up a time for that? Whatever would be convenient, and just a work session with you. And I guess we envision it as possibly either an hour before your next planning session or something like that. But we certainly would like to sit down and talk about direction and have questions from you and go from there. So I guess we can just go ahead and set that up sometime.
Yep, and we'll be having a discussion this evening on scheduling work sessions and considering additional dates, so we can maybe talk about that as well a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Dina. So again, thank you very much, and hang in there. It's a great job, but there's a lot of reading, I know it, so thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the pin and the kind words. And yeah, a meeting is long overdue with council and planning commission. So get that. Thank you. Okay, next item. I need. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the December 27th, 2017 meeting? Does anyone have any questions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to call for a motion and a second to approve the minutes for December 27th, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for Wednesday, December 27, 2017.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Clark.
I'll second that.
Second, Commissioner. You got Harriman on my mind now. Harmon. I do. I got to stop talking to him. It's either Rick or John or Harmon or Harriman. It's Harmon. Mr. Mulready, please call roll, please.
Chairman Maloney.
Aye.
Commissioner Sherrod.
Aye.
Commissioner Dorito.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith is absent. Commissioner Harmon?
Aye.
And Commissioner Ledoux?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. There are no public hearings tonight, but we do have discussion items. The first discussion item is the Commercial District Calibration and Riverfront District Creation. So are we starting with a staff report / presentation?
So it's just a discussion. So it's not we're not doing a public hearing or anything. It's just a discussion item on the agenda. So the purpose is just to introduce you to some of the heavy reading that you will have coming up in the next several months in terms of some upcoming work on zone district work within the city. And so there's two components of that, and I'll walk through each one separately. There was a very brief overview in your packets, and then Patrick just handed out a little bit more detail background on each of those, so you should have those in front of you. And basically, I'm just going to walk through that with you. And I will do that actually in reverse of what was on the agenda. I'll start with the riverfront component first. So basically in December of last year, as you are aware, you had a recommendation to council, and then council approved the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan in December of 2017. One of the near-term implementation items identified in that plan, which is the final chapter of the plan, is talking about implementation steps. One of those implementation steps is to actually create riverfront zone district language that currently does not exist within the city. So right now, there is no riverfront zone districts that exist. So the maps that you have up by you, and actually is on the wall behind the screen here, is the zoning map of the city. But going with that zoning map is the actual language of what can and can't occur, which is basically in the municipal code. So there's two parts to zoning in the city. One is the language, which is in here, and two is where that language geographically applies in the city, and that's the map. So I think the important thing to note from the riverfront zone district standpoint is we want to simply create the language at this point. We don't want to map a zone district. We just want to create the language so that the tool is there for either an existing or future property owner to come in and actively ask to be rezoned to a riverfront zone district. And that's different from the commercial work where we would actually go in and update the map as well. So some of these overlap. So again, back on the riverfront zone district work, it's basically an implementation step that's been identified from a regulating document in the community. That's the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan. And that recommendation identified the creation of two different new riverfront zone districts. And that basically follows the recommendation that's in the plan that identified two new land use categories. So as we know, the land use comes first, basically identifying a land use as a general category in the community, and then the next step or more detailed information to that land use is creating zoning language for that land use. So this is that next step from that plan. And I'll just pull up, and I know this is our comprehensive plan. Again, the comprehensive plan dates to 2001. We don't have it electronically, so this is the best graphic quality we can get on the existing land use map that we have in the community right now. But basically, the first step, again, in the plan is identifying a land use. And so this is the land use map of the city. The focus area for the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan, where the new land uses were identified that have been adopted, is basically in this golden area between 1st and 12th, is where the new land uses were updated and adopted as part of the plan. And those were basically a riverfront mixed-use land use and a riverfront residential land use. So the land uses have been adopted as part of the master plan. The next step now is to go in and create the zoning language for if, again, an owner wanted to come in and apply that zoning language in this area, they could if they so choose to do that. And so basically, the geographic area that we're looking at is pretty much confined between First and it's about 11th or 12th, right? And so that's if mapped, or if an applicant would come in and want to apply that zoning language, the underlying land use is there to support rezoning to riverfront zone district language. And that's what we're creating, is the actual zone district language. So, and the other thing, important thing to note is, so this is the existing zoning map that you have in front of you. And if we zoom into that area basically between First and 12th, currently a lot of that land is zoned industrial. And as part of the revitalization effort along the riverfront, we want to afford the opportunity for folks to rezone to a higher use and higher possibility and more mixed use possibility than simply being industrial land. And so again, that's another implementation step or next step from the adoption of the master plan. So basically, we would be looking at creating language, again, just the language in the book, so to speak, not necessarily clearly mapping it on the map. So that's the component for the riverfront zoning language. That's sort of the background of why we're doing it from a next step standpoint, from an adopted plan. But as has been happening across the United States for the past 30-some years, historically a lot of communities turn their backs on their riverfronts, and a lot of the land uses and uses along riverfronts have been industrial over time. And literally going back about 30 years now across the United States and beyond, there have been a lot of efforts to revitalize riverfronts and really, instead of turning your back to your riverfront, actually having the river be the front door to the community. And we've had those conversations in the past about how important that is for Canyon City. And especially in that area between First and 12th, because it's really an extension of downtown and extending from Main Street all the way to the river. So, having that zoning language in place is really a tool that property owners, any prospective new property owners or developers that may come in, they want certainty. They want to know what the rules are and have those rules be very clear. And so that's another reason to go ahead and create the language such that that tool exists that they could apply if they wish to do so. Relating it to the community strategic plan, there are 3 of the 6 pillars in the strategic plan are economic development, attractive built environment, and community investment opportunities. So there's another regulating document, the city's strategic plan, that supports this effort on creating the zone district language. And this isn't just for the riverfront piece, but also for the commercial piece. And so I pulled some of the statistics as well from the citizen survey that talks about, what's the impression currently in terms of the community quality overall. In the last 2 years, the community survey has really rated that pretty low. So another reason why, by virtue of updating some of our codes, hopefully we can eventually, as new development comes in, we can improve the overall quality of the built environment in the community. So the second component of that is was a survey question on natural built environment. Again, that from an existing condition standpoint was rated very low. So another reason to start working on some of these updates to our ordinances. And then another key element that I pulled out is the question that was asked in the survey about how important is it for the community to focus on economic health, and that rated very high, and B, overall built environment, and that rated high. So it's not just, there are many facets of why we're going through and doing these additional steps. It's the input that we're receiving from the community, from the citizen survey. It's following up on some of the desired actions in the community strategic plan, and it's a clear next step, implementation step to the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan. So we're just getting started. The items to consider through this effort are some of the questions that I've identified here. That what are the critical considerations from a riverfront zoning standpoint? What are the current trends in riverfront zoning in communities in Colorado and beyond Colorado? What is needed from an urban form standpoint? What is needed to accommodate a mix of uses that's envisioned along the riverfront? And then lastly, what outside of kind of basic use and bulk requirements, kind of the typical components that are in a zoning ordinance, what other elements are critical to riverfront zoning to assure a long-term legacy is being created for the community? So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about and asking through this effort. Stepping down a little bit further, why are we starting on this now? How has this gotten kicked off? Well, we're very lucky to have a collaborator on each of these efforts, and that is basically a University of Colorado Denver capstone student. So it's a Master's of Urban Planning candidate who's in their last semester working towards their master's degree, and their final project is called their capstone project. So the city staff applied to get some student assistance to help us start this effort. And luckily, we have 2 students helping us, one helping us specifically on the riverfront component, and another separate student helping us on the commercial component. So they're doing a good deal of existing conditions analysis for us and looking at some case studies and pulling case studies, and they will eventually be proposing some language to staff and to the city as well. So they're working on their spring semester. So they've just begun that work fairly recently, and under the schedule portion of the memo that I've handed out, we can just walk through some of the key dates that we know, at least tied to their schedule. And that's really introducing the issue tonight, February 28th at Planning Commission. We are expecting, meaning staff is expecting to get some draft language and draft information from the student around March 16th, which is just prior to their spring break. We are then introducing this issue to council at the April 18th Vision Committee meeting. That's what's planned at this time. And then we will be coming back to Planning Commission. Right now, we're planning on the April 25th Planning Commission meeting to actually have the students give a presentation to Planning Commission with some of their findings and recommendations. So they will be coming to you in April. And then, as we know, semesters are really pretty short time frames, so all of their work needs to be basically done by May 7th. So that will end their participation in the process, and from that point, then staff will really start digging in and work to finalize that riverfront zone district language. From a timing standpoint, because we have the 2 students, both of the efforts are starting paralleling because of the students' schedules. But when the students' work ends, we are then going to prioritize, because this is a priority of council, we're going to prioritize finalizing the riverfront zone district language and bringing that forward through Planning Commission and council. And then generally after the riverfront work is done, then we will shift and focus on the commercial zone district work. So, I mean, we don't envision that, everything's going to be answered through the students' work, but, given some of the limited staff capabilities and depth that we have, it's a great resource that we're able to have this to kick off these efforts. So that's kind of a broad overview of both efforts, a little bit more specific on the riverfront effort, and then I'll shift gears and maybe go into a little bit more detail on the background of why we're doing the commercial zone district component. And so I think most of you are probably familiar, but just to let you know, this is the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan that was adopted, and this is the reason that we're now doing the next step of creating the riverfront zone district language. Similarly, in terms of the commercial zone district work, the reason that we're working on that is an implementation step from the US 50 corridor plan that was adopted in 2015. And in that corridor plan, which basically looked at the entirety of US 50 from the western city limits basically over to the eastern city limits, one of the implementation steps from this plan, which is also an adopted document, is to calibrate the existing commercial zone districts in the community. So, and right now from, actually we can probably use this one.
I can put the other presentation up.
That's what I've got here. Yeah, we can pull up the other one to zoom in, but basically right now in the, yeah, let's do that, please.
Other presentation?
Yeah. So basically in the city right now, we have two commercial zone districts, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. One is the Central Business District, the CBD, and then the second one is General Commercial. So for the entirety of the city of Canyon City, we have two commercial zone districts. And part of the recommendation in the quarter plan was to really take a close look at those zone districts and see if they're permitting the types of uses and types of form of development that we would like to see in the city moving forward. So there's a couple of different components to consider this. And again, these are all supported by not only this specific adopted document, but referencing some of those concerns in the citizen survey and focus areas, and is also supported by some of the goals in the city's strategic plan. Let's go through this. So the zoning map here, I've highlighted, these are our two commercial zone districts. The general commercial district, which is showing up as this kind of putty color, I guess I will call it, which is literally everything from the far eastern city limits and covers even land and properties along US 50 or RGB, basically within our downtown area. That's all the general commercial district. And from a parcel size standpoint, it includes everything from some of the original platted lots that are 40 feet wide by 120 feet to very large big box lots such as Walmart and Home Depot. That's all under one zone district currently. And then the second zone district is the Central Business District, which is the darker area that's concentrated primarily in and around the historic district. So we want to take a look at the existing zone district language and make sure that it's calibrated, that it's the right zoning, the right uses, the right form, the right lot coverage for the right places in the city. And I guess the best example to go back to is just the example in the general commercial district where it's sort of a one-size-fits-all in terms of the language we currently have, but we clearly have very, very different parcel sizes from, as I mentioned, kind of a historic 40-foot lot to a Home Depot-sized lot. And so we want to calibrate or really look at what's the right type of zone district language, and do we actually potentially need a third commercial district in the city to better allow the right type of development as we're transitioning from the eastern gateway of the city to the historic downtown. So that's sort of a big overview or big picture, and I'll open it up for questions.
Dina, what's in other communities, if it's comparable size to ours, what's the number of commercial zone districts they have? Is 2 to 3 typical, or?
I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily based on the size of the community or say population of the community. We haven't really started looking at that. Again, the student is starting that work for us, and staff will dive into it, deeper as we move through this. The one thing that was noted, though, in this effort was clearly, hey, you have some big diversity between what's happening in your downtown and what's happening on the very eastern edge of the community, but yet you're applying the exact same code language, right, or regulations or restrictions. And so, not only does the city's strategic plan talk about improving aesthetics, some more of the detail in the US 50 quarter plan talks about having that appropriate transition as people are coming into the community from the western boundary and a speed limit that's 55 miles an hour transitioning to 45 miles an hour and eventually transitioning to about 30 miles an hour. And so what type of development, what parcel size is appropriate for those different areas of the community. And as I'm thinking about it, I believe the US 50 quarter plan actually identified sort of 3 primary segments of the US 50 quarter plan. And I think that's why logically, as a recommendation from the plan, the thought was, hey, maybe start by looking at those 3 segments as identified in the plan and consider maybe those being the geographic areas where there's zone district language for each of those.
I guess that's kind of my question is the addition of 1 going to cover it, or, I mean,
We don't know yet.
I would be prepared that we might be looking at the addition of 2 or 3 more?
Yeah, we don't know yet.
Okay.
Does the commercial now, I know there was a lot of discussion about the riverfront rezoning already. You could almost call it public hearings so far already, but when it comes to the commercial, will we need to go, I'm assuming it's going to be the same kind of a process. We create the zoning language, and then they apply pretty much
Well,
to
so-
rezone?
So right now, so a good question, Commissioner. Right now, the idea is that for the riverfront work, we would simply create the zone districts and they would exist in the municipal code. For the commercial work, we're thinking of actually going through the remapping process as well. So obviously, that's a much longer process, more involved public meetings and things
Public
like that,
hearings
and
and-
those weren't necessarily budgeted this year. So we're still vetting whether, are we going to be able to get this accomplished yet this year? It might stretch out into 2019. We just don't know yet, so.
I don't
But-
recall from the plan now, are there recommendations in the plan of certain zoning language or commercial? You said there were 3, I think there were 3 distinct
3 different
areas.
distinct segments. I don't think the plan actually got into that level of detail
No
of
real
of
language.
recommending some high-level bullets, whereas the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan did
Yeah.
identify some very broad bullets. So-
Okay.
Are there any questions from the audience on this subject?
I just remember it was like eastern portal, western portal, central were 3 from the border, so as far as the Highway 50. We were part of some of those.
Did you have a question about any of this, or you just?
No, we're
just
good.
listen? Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, has there been any questioning brought up by businesses or any concerns brought up by businesses yet about the commercial zoning?
No, I mean, literally, this is the first sort of, public
Yeah.
meeting where it's being discussed. So it's being introduced to you first as Planning Commission, and then it'll be introduced at a Council Vision Committee meeting again in April. So these are the first times that this is being introduced, and we'll be working forward from there.
Okay.
Any other questions about either of these 2 discussion items? All right, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Next on our agenda is, nothing, but we do have to discuss work sessions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. We are anticipating, not only, obviously, we've got some new members, and we'd like to conduct a training session, and I gather that there was a training session held last fall for some new members that was found to be fairly useful. We'd like to kind of repeat that for new members. We also anticipate that with what we're seeing in terms of pre-application interest in new projects happening, there may be a need for scheduling of special planning commission meetings in 2018. And so what we'd like to do is kind of identify potential dates, if you will, by time of the month, as to when Planning Commission would be available to meet for a second time in a calendar month. I put together, we've got a list of the dates where meetings and events happen in this council chambers. Obviously, with council meeting the first and third Mondays of the month, they also have study sessions, General Government and Vision Committee on the first and third Wednesday of the month. The caveat to that is it's only after the first regular council meeting of the month has occurred. And then obviously, Board of Adjustment happens on the first Tuesday of the month. What that tends to leave open in terms of the calendar happens to be the second week of the month. There don't appear to be very many meetings scheduled at all during the second meeting of the month. And so I'd like to query Planning Commission about your availability to meet, and is there a particular night of the week that would be best, the second week of the month?
So it was brain damage getting us to change this to the fourth Wednesday of the month.
Yes.
So, but there are new people. I'm guessing we're just gonna have to take a email poll of what we're, throw a few options out there and see what works for everyone. That's what we did to get to this point.
Yeah, so I think the considerations are, another consideration may be just simply meeting to have a work session, say at 5 PM, if that worked, before a regular planning commission at 6 PM. So that might be something else to consider. So it would be on the same evening that you have in your calendars, if you're able to start at an earlier time. Or as Patrick mentioned, consider something the second week of the month. The other consideration is, one of the main reasons we switched to the fourth Wednesday of the month was to have the attorney be present if we had something where we want them present for a meeting or a work session. And that's why we landed on the fourth Wednesday of the month. And so we know that the attorneys are not available on Tuesdays. So.
I was going to ask a question, wouldn't we be able to necessarily use them via phone conference while we're doing that?
We could, but that's still, they're not available on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So, yep.
I would just, everyone can think about this. We're not under, in any hurry to figure this out,
Right.
because it'll just eventually happen. But we used to have the work session prior to the planning commission meeting, regular meeting. Of course, our meeting started at 7 then, so we did a 6 o'clock and then a 7 o'clock regular meeting. So now we're at a 6 o'clock regular meeting, so that's 5, which is a little early. But that would be my preference. But you guys can all think about it, and we can communicate. You can send an email out with some ideas, and we can all kind of vote, just reply all, so we're all in the loop.
But you're talking about these as work sessions, not special meetings, though. Or do we have enough business for another week, a month for?
At the moment, we do not. We are anticipating, as the year goes on, we may see an uptick in the number of applications we're processing that do require public hearings before Planning Commission and Council. Council, of course, has the benefit of already meeting twice a month. To the extent that we get to the point where we need to have a second meeting night a month, we could probably bring that back to you and pick a day.
I guess as long as they're work sessions and they don't run on to, like some of the meetings can, then prior to would be fine. It just,
No, they would, they would be open to the public, but they would be an hour and that's it. And then we'd all come in here right immediately after. So that's my preference, but no, we don't have to make a decision tonight, right? So everyone can think about it and maybe just send an email to everyone saying, here's my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, one other item for you all to think about before our next meeting. We determined that we probably need to have Planning Commission vote to elect a vice chairman as well.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
We can put that on the agenda for the March meeting.
So we would, if anyone offered that, then we would consider them, and then we would vote on it. Otherwise, we would try to nominate someone at the meeting, correct?
Correct.
So sometime between now and next meeting, if anyone would like to consider being vice chair of the planning commission, just let me know and Mr. Mulready know. Fair enough? Otherwise, someone's gonna get voted in. And it might be the guy that's not here, I don't know.
I was gonna say, let's try the short straw for Randy right now.
Okay.
I think we can solve this.
All right, do you guys, anything else from staff tonight?
From staff.
Anything else from commissioners? Okay, meeting adjourned, thank you.